Thank you so much for joining me as I tell you my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch 2 after it has been out for over 3 months. Now, I've had this console since day one, and anyone who knows me and my channel knows that I love the Nintendo Switch 2, but that doesn't mean that I'm afraid to criticize it for its shortcomings and that I'm afraid to criticize Nintendo. So I actually want to start this video off by talking about my disappointments with the Nintendo Switch 2. And my first major disappointment is obviously the game key cards, because while I'm very glad that the Nintendo Switch 2 is getting pretty good third-party support so far, it is a major disappointment when we see that a lot of these games are getting these game key card releases, because a lot of gamers like myself want to own the true physical game. We want to be able to put the cartridge in and be able to play it without having to download it or anything. We don't want to have to worry about the servers being shut down years from now and basically rendering these key cards useless. And yes, I do know, once you download the game, you can even re-download it after the servers are shut down. Like I believe at least here in North America right now, you can still download your old Wii games, but that just still isn't as forever as a true physical copy. And I imagine it's probably only a matter of time before you're not able to download those old digital games anymore. And I just believe it takes the option of physical games away. They're basically trying to give us these digital games as if they're physical. It does have a little more benefits, like, yeah, you can sell it, you can trade it, but why not just do the digital release? And if these cartridges are really that expensive, just come out with a true physical, make it $10 more. Shouldn't that be fine? Or even if it's $15 more, whatever. And at least there's multiple options for people if they want the digital or if they want the physical. Now, I do understand why Nintendo made the game key cards. They said they made them to future-proof their console because a lot of big games these days are over 64 gigabytes, some of these third-party games. So yeah, I understand that, and I don't think that Nintendo is trying to force digital on us, but they basically have enabled these third-party companies to do that because they don't want to pay for the cartridges. I think it kind of shows that this whole physical media thing with the Switch 2 could have been rushed out by Nintendo, because even for their own games, like say Donkey Kong Bonanza, I think that's a 12 gigabyte game, but Nintendo still has to pay to put that on a 64 gigabyte cartridge. And the reason why I don't think Nintendo is trying to force the key cards is because their games are still on their cartridge. I think they just made these key cards to accommodate the third parties, because they're going to do whatever they can to get as much third-party support on the Switch 2 as they can. But these third parties are really cheaping out with this, and I think they're really underestimating the demand for true physical media. So hopefully that situation gets better. Even if we got physical releases through limited run, it would be much better than these key cards. But my next complaint about the Nintendo Switch 2, or disappointment, kind of ties into the whole key card thing, and it's the fact that compared to the Switch 1 was the last of a dying breed when it comes to consoles, because it pretty much offered that plug and play experience for like 95% of games, where you could put a first party game, a third party game, you could put most games in the console off the cartridge and never have to download anything. As a matter of fact, like my first 2 years that I owned the Nintendo Switch 1, I didn't have internet and I was able to play all of my games just fine. And while the backwards compatibility on the Nintendo Switch 2 is absolutely phenomenal, it's making these games look better than ever in some cases, and in most cases it's definitely making all of these games run better. It is a little disappointing that you can't just put the Switch 1 cartridge in most of the time and just play it. I've noticed that most of the time when I try to play a Switch 1 game on the Switch 2, it won't even let you start the game up without downloading the update to run it on the Switch 2. And I understand maybe there's nothing Nintendo could have done about that, but I think they could have at least given the option where you don't have to update it and you can just play it how it would play on the Switch 1. I don't know if that would have been possible, but I know that is going to be a disappointment for some people, because while you still have that plug and play experience with the Switch 2 exclusives that you can play off the cartridge and the third-party games that are on the cartridge. For most Switch 1 games, you're going to have to download an update to play them, and it is really quick. It's like a few seconds, it feels like, but it's just a little bit disappointing that the Switch 2 didn't carry on their tradition of the Switch 1 with basically being an offline console if you want it to be that. So my last disappointment about the Nintendo Switch 2 is just a slight disappointment, but I have to say that I am just slightly disappointed about the fact that most of these third-party ports seem like they're only going to be running at 30 frames per second. I mean, maybe Nintendo did the best they could to make this console as powerful as it could. I mean, I think it's really cool that at least from a visual standpoint, these games are pretty much looking on par with the PS5 and the Xbox Series versions. But I do hope that at least a lot of these games can be further optimized to maybe get a performance mode where maybe they can downgrade the graphics a little and still give the 60 frames per second for performance for, you know, people who want that option. And I do hope that it's done on a case-by-case basis. For example, like if Sega comes out with a brand new next-gen Sonic game, I hope for Switch 2 they wouldn't just cut it down to 30, because those faster paced action games, you definitely want the full performance frame rate on those games. But the Switch 2, I'm not going to criticize the power. It's definitely a capable console. It's more powerful than the Steam Deck. And for the price, what you're getting for a hybrid console and a handheld, I think it's definitely better than pretty much most options out there. Unless you're a big PC fan, maybe you might want to wait for the Steam Deck 2, but I think the Switch 2 is definitely, not that I think, I know it's definitely significantly more powerful than the Steam Deck and the Steam Deck OLED. So the power is definitely, it's good enough, definitely good enough, but I just hope not every third-party port will be 30 frames per second opposed to 60. Now, a major criticism of the Nintendo Switch 2 has been the pricing of the games, in particular Mario Kart World being $80. Maybe this is a hot take, but for me, Nintendo releasing old games like Donkey Kong Country Returns and charging $60 on the Nintendo Switch 1, I think is actually worse priced than Mario Kart World at $80, because at least this is a brand new experience. If you know you like this game, you know you're gonna sink a ton of hours into it. But I will say, I don't think they should do any more $80 games. I do think that Mario Kart World should have been $70, and if Nintendo wants better PR going forward, hopefully they don't price any of their games at $80 going forward. But I won't lie, if the new Zelda is $80, I'm still gonna buy it, and yes, I am gonna buy the physical. So yeah, I do think that Nintendo does have a bit of a pricing problem, but as long as they don't keep putting out $80 games, or at least not too many, then I don't think it's a major problem with the Switch 2. So now that I've gotten my criticisms about the Nintendo Switch 2 out of the way, let's talk about the things that I like and absolutely love about this console. Now, I know people keep complaining about the fact that there isn't enough games on the Switch 2, but I honestly think that's just silly. If you're an early adopter of any console, that is going to be the case. But right out of the gate, Nintendo gave us two banger exclusives with Mario Kart World, which I know there were some criticisms about, but the Knockout Tour mode is absolutely addictive, a lot of fun. The new voice chat to talk to friends while playing is really cool too. And Donkey Kong Bonanza is an absolutely phenomenal 9 or 10 out of 10 game. Action adventure 3D platformer is just so much fun. I think this was a great exclusive to have on the Nintendo Switch 2 so early in its life cycle. And I think it was actually refreshing to get a new Donkey Kong game, a 3D Donkey Kong game after so many years, instead of just launching with 3D Mario right away. So the games I think are fine. And I'm actually recording this video just 2 days before we're gonna get that 60-minute big Nintendo Direct. So hopefully Nintendo definitely shows some cool games off so people don't feel like there aren't enough good games coming to the console. Now, one of the major criticisms about the Nintendo Switch 2 has been the screen. The fact that the screen is a big downgrade from the Nintendo Switch OLED. I am someone who has had the Nintendo Switch OLED pretty much since it first came out, and I think the screen on that console looks amazing. But honestly, when I first got the Nintendo Switch 2, I noticed right away, of course the screen is bigger than ever, but it's also brighter than ever. The screen looks great. The 1080p compared to the 720p resolution on the Switch 1 makes a huge difference. These games look so clear, so amazing on the Nintendo Switch 2, especially when you play Switch 1 games that have gotten official upgrades like Super Mario Odyssey. Playing it in handheld on the Switch 2, it looks better than it ever did on the Switch 1, even when it was docked. So I don't think there's anything wrong with this screen. I know people did some technical test and said that, oh, the screen has really bad ghosting. When you play 2D games, you can see the little ghosting trail behind the characters. And I gotta be honest, I haven't played like any Super Nintendo 2D games on the Switch 2, but the ones I have played, like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and Super Mario U Deluxe, look amazing on the Nintendo Switch 2. And I have to say that I've even played some 2D beat-em-ups on the Switch 2, and I haven't noticed this ghosting at all. So I'm here to kind of debunk that whole screen criticism. The screen on the Nintendo Switch 2 is still better than the Nintendo Switch OLED, even if it's not an OLED screen. It's a really nice modern LCD screen. I really don't get what all the criticism about. To me, that's just kind of coming from Nintendo haters who are looking to nitpick and criticize anything they can about this console. Another thing that I absolutely love about the Nintendo Switch 2 is just the overall build, feel, and quality of this handheld. I love the way the magnets feel. Just taking them in and out here just feels so smooth and seamless. It doesn't feel like they're gonna go off the rails like some people had that problem with the Nintendo Switch 1. And I can honestly say that this is the most premium feeling handheld that I have ever held in my hands. And it actually is the most premium handheld screen that I have ever looked at. And I do have a Nintendo Switch OLED, and I'm just gonna say that to me, the screen on the Switch 2 is definitely significantly better than the Nintendo Switch OLED screen. Some other criticisms that people have had about the Nintendo Switch 2 or the fact that they say it's just a beefed up Switch. It's just basically a Switch Pro. We don't know why they called it a Switch 2. Why did they call it a Switch 2? Because it's literally the next generation of the Nintendo Switch 1. It's not just an upgraded Switch 1. We're at the Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 1 was definitely not going to run Cyberpunk. It wasn't going to run Donkey Kong Bonanza in the form that it released in. It wasn't going to run Mario Kart World in the form that it released in, with the high frame rates, the high frames per second, the high resolution. And they say it doesn't have that, unique Nintendo charm. Well, what did the Switch 1 have besides being a hybrid? It had the gyro controls, which were basically, in my opinion, a worse version of the motion controls from the Nintendo Wii. But the Nintendo Switch 2 has the mouse controls, which to me is a totally unique, quirky, gimmicky Nintendo thing that you haven't seen anywhere else on any other handheld. So I definitely think the Nintendo Switch 2 is unique enough and different enough from the Switch 1. I mean, just like you had the Nintendo DS and 3DS, I don't remember anyone ever saying, oh, the 3DS isn't different enough from the DS. It's just a beefed up DS. I think this console is definitely unique enough to stand on its own, and it's definitely significantly more powerful than the Switch 1, as Nvidia, who made the chip for this console, came out themselves and said that it's 10 times more powerful than the Switch 1. So how is that just a Switch Pro? It's running games that we would have never got on the Switch 1. It's running Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Remake, but it looks like Rebirth will be coming to it as well. So those criticisms are just silly to me. The Nintendo Switch 2 is great. I love the exclusives. I love the game. As a handheld gamer, I can honestly say I think this is the best handheld that your money can buy you in 2025. Whether you already have a Switch library, it's gonna make your Switch 1 library better than ever. Or even if you don't have a Switch 1, I think you're just better off buying this one, because it's gonna play all your Switch 1 games, and you're gonna be able to play all these new awesome Switch 2 games that are gonna be coming. And I absolutely can't wait to see what we're going to get at this Nintendo Direct on Friday. But I really do appreciate you all watching this video so much. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. Also hit that hype button if you have that feature available to you. And if you like Nintendo Switch 1 and 2 content, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Again, I really appreciate you watching so much, and I will catch you all on the next one.